My honor today to introduce Roger Fernandes and Fern Renville. Roger is a member of the Clallum Indian, and Fern is a member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyote tribe. And Roger is an accomplished, besides being an accomplished storyteller, he's also helped with history in the area. He's helped people be aware of their indigenous culture, and he's an artist, a wonderful artist. I have some of his work in my home. And he and Fern have a regular storytelling time on Facebook, and at 7 in the evenings if you want to listen to more besides today. And Fern is also an artist, a teacher, actor, director, and playwright, and a Dakota Sioux storyteller. I'm so honored to be able to welcome them, and thank you, the city of Shoreline, for allowing us this opportunity today. Welcome, Roger and Fern.
Thank you. Thank you, good people. We're really happy to have this chance to share some stories with you all. We both know stories from our own tribes, but we know stories from other tribes as well, and we share them in a way that people understand that storytelling is teaching. So again, I'm from the Lower Elwha, the Clallum people. Clallum County is named after us, but that's not really our name. Our real name is Nuxcleum, which means strong people. English speakers couldn't say it apparently, so they call us Clallum, but that's okay. We're teaching them, it's Nuxcleum. And I'll let Fern say a few things.
Greetings, my relatives. My name is Fernandes and Fern Renville. I am Sisseton, Dakota. My father is Robin Renville, his great-grandson of Tiwakam, last chief of the Sisseton Wahpeton on Dakota lands before we were exiled. I carry stories from my homeland, and I'm so happy to be here today to share them with you. Roger and I are not storytellers unless we have people to share them with. So thank you all.
All right. So let's see, if I click on me, that means we can see ourselves better. Hold on a sec. I guess we'll just keep it the way it is. All right. So I'll go ahead and get started with a couple of the local tribal stories. My story is very quick. I was not born and raised on the reservation. My mother was born and raised in a village called Pisht, which is outside of Port Angeles, a small village. She moved to the city. I was born in the city of Seattle, raised in the city of Seattle. So I had to go back and learn all the things I'm going to share with you. I encourage people, look back at your ancestors. That oftentimes in the modern world, we're told to forget them, move on, move forward. We don't look back. But when we don't look back, we miss out on so much wisdom and knowledge. So everyone listening, please, if you haven't done so, look back at your ancestors. They have much to teach you. They knew you would be here. They sent you stories and songs and dances that you might live in the world in a good way. So I'm going to share a couple stories that come from this area, the Puget Sound area. Many, many small tribes, every river around here. There are many rivers coming out of the mountains here, and every river is named after the native people that live along it. And so think about all the rivers you know here, and they have an Indian name, the Snohomish River, the Nisqually River, the Skagit River, the Duwamish River, all these rivers named for the people here. So our relationship with the water, with the rivers and the salt water, also with the mountains, also with the forests that cover the mountains, and the salmon that come up the rivers, and the shellfish that cover the beaches. So we explain our relationship to all these things in our stories. And one of my teachers, who I went back to learn from Skokomish, the Skokomish tribe, he would always say, plants are our greatest teachers. Plants are our greatest teachers. They have everything to teach us, because the plants were given, he said, the original teachings. They were told this is how you live in the world, and they shared that with the animals and the people that came after them. And so again, the plants have much to teach us. I'm still just scratching the surface of understanding that. Fern has a much deeper knowledge because of her upbringing with her relatives, her grandmother and relatives on her reservation. But I've been learning. In fact, I've eaten nettle. I don't know if you guys have eaten nettle before, but you can eat it, and it's really good and nutritious. And I'm going to tell you a story now. I'm going to tell you a story with stinging nettle in it. So this story is told by the tribes around here in different ways, different languages, different environments. So the story might be a little bit different from tribe to tribe, but it's still essentially this story. In the Lushootseed language of this area right here, the storyteller says, Il Ture Tuhak. Il Ture Tuhak means a long time ago. So, Il Ture Tuhak, the people of this land, the people who live here in what we call Puget Sound now, the people who lived along these salt waters where we live today, the people who lived in the small villages along the rivers that feed into the salt water, the people of this land, they were frightened. They lived lives of fear. They were always afraid. They were always hiding in the shadows. They were always looking behind themselves. They were frightened. They lived lives of fear. What the people were afraid of were those men in their big canoes who would come down from the north. They would come from their villages far to the north. They would come in their big canoes and they would attack our people. They would attack our villages. They would beat people and rob from people. They would burn the villages. They would kill people. They would even take people back to the north as slaves. And so these men came down and did terrible things. And our people were frightened because they never knew when they might appear. They never knew what terrible things they might do. So our people led lives of fear. Well, there was a young woman in one of the villages here, and she said, my people should not be afraid. They should not be frightened. There must be something I can do. And so that night before she went to sleep, she prayed. She prayed to the ancestors. She prayed to the spirits. And while she was asleep, she had a dream. And in the dream, a plant came to speak with her. It was a stinging nettle plant. And the stinging nettle plant spoke to her. And the stinging nettle plant gave her these instructions. I want you, said the plant, I want you to tell your people to gather my leaves in the springtime when I'm growing. Gather my leaves when they're at their most power. Have their most power in the springtime, and then dry the leaves and then make them into a tea. And I want everyone to drink the tea together. Drink the tea together. And as you drink the tea, I want you to say these words. We will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come. We will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come. These were the instructions. And the young woman woke up and she told the people what the dream told her, the plant told her. And so the people followed the dream. They gathered this nettle leaves in the springtime. They dried them. They made the tea. They drank the tea together. And as they drank the tea, they said those words. We will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come. And the people felt a little stronger. Well, the young woman had another dream. And in the dream, the stinging nettle plant returned and said, I want your strongest men and women warriors to take my whole body, my stalk, my stems, my branches, my leaves, and to hit themselves with me, whip themselves with me. And when they feel the pain of my sting, that is my power. When they feel my power entering their body, I want them to say those same words. We will be strong for our ancestors. We will be strong for our people. We will be strong for the ones to come. And so the woman woke and told the warriors of her dream. And they followed it. They got the stinging nettle plant and they whipped themselves. They flogged themselves with it. And when they felt the power of the nettle entering their body, they said those words again. And the people felt a little stronger. Well, one day word came. Those men in their canoes were coming. They're coming down from the north right now. They've reported in the other villages, and so they're coming now. But instead of running to hide in the woods, as the people had done so many times before, the people did not run. The people did not run to hide. They gathered, and in one long line, they all walked down to the beach. Everyone, women, elders, children, men, they all walked down to the beach in one long line, and they stood in one long line along the beach, shoulder to shoulder, looking out of the salt water. When the men in the canoes appeared, they saw the people standing in a line on the beach, and they thought this would be easy now. We can attack them, and they began to paddle their canoes harder to attack the people. But when they got close, the people began to sing a song in one voice. They sang this song loudly in one voice. This is a warrior song they sang. Ho hey yo ho ho hey yo ho hey yo ho ho hey yo ho hey yo hey yo ho 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 hey yo hey yo ho 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 hey yo ho ho hey yo ho hey yo ho ho hey yo ho hey yo hey yo ho ho hoo, hi-yoo, hi-hoo, hoo, hoo. And the men of the canoe saw the people were standing shoulder to shoulder, not afraid, singing a song in one loud voice. And so the men of the canoes realized the people could not be defeated. The people were not afraid. And so they turned their canoes and they went back to the north, leaving our people unharmed, leaving our villages safe. And that is all, the story called How Stinging Nettle Saved the People. So I look at this story, I'm just going to say a couple things at the end. My job is to tell the story. By telling you the story, I've taught you something. I am a teacher. Whenever you hear a story, especially a traditional native story, you're being taught something. The story is given as a way of teaching you something that maybe would be difficult for our brain to figure out how to explain, but the story explains it wonderfully. And so when I work with children, I tell them this story. They love this story. What do you think their response to the story are? What are your response to the story? What meanings do you get from the story? Children often say, we stand together, we're stronger. We stand together, we're stronger. Another part of this story is the people had a huge problem. The men coming from the north, attacking the villages, attacking the people, that problem. And they would run from that problem. They would hide from that problem. Is that the way to solve a problem? And it's not, is it? And so you must stand and stand together to confront this problem. You must face the problem, do something with it. And so again, these are subtle teachings within the story. But again, a powerful one is a young woman received a message through a dream. And for Native people, dreams are a voice from inside of us that's coming to teach us something. So we pay attention to our dreams. They're not just some kind of neurological, response to overstimulus or whatever they're calling it now. It is a way of a voice from within us speaking to us. So again, there's all these subtle things in this story that they're meant to teach us something. But my job is not to explain these things to you, as I just did. I apologize. I just want to give you an example that within this story are teachings, things we can learn and even apply to our life today. Stinging nettle, one culture might consider it a weed that has to be eradicated with poisons and cutting it down and addressing it like it's unwanted. But for Native people, stinging nettle is a powerful medicine, a powerful food, and a powerful fiber plant. So we look at the stinging nettle as a powerful gift, a powerful friend, a powerful teacher. So again, that's how we approach storytelling, that within this story, we can find things, and we can find things that can help us. Our people are returning to their old diets because our ancestors were healthy as your ancestors were healthy. The modern diet we're eating, and I'm no one to lecture anyone on this, but the modern diet that we're eating is full of things that are not good for us. And so we must take control of our own bodies and what we put into it. And again, other people have studied this a long time longer than me, and I'm just bringing up and saying it when I have a chance to say it, that I need to have nettle in my diet. I need to have chemist bulbs in my diet. I need to have more clams in my diet as well. So that story is called How Stinging Nettle Saved the People. And I'm going to tell you another short story, and then I'm going to turn over to Fern. This story, again, comes to this area around here, another plant that we all know well, I'm sure. But again, the story gives it meaning. This plant is not just here as some kind of environmental, biological outcome of forces that are beyond our control. It has a meaning, it has a purpose. So this story is about a long time ago, a long time ago, in a village not far from here, there lived a man and his family. And he had a daughter who he loved very much. She was dear to his heart, especially dear to his heart. And so he loved his daughter very much. And one day his daughter fell ill. She got sick. And she was sick. She was feverish. She was coughing. She ached. And she was getting sick. And so the family did what medicine they could, because they have their own plant medicines to take care of these things. But she did not get better. In fact, the next day she was worse. She had a fever. She was coughing. She was in pain. She couldn't eat anymore. She couldn't hold the food into her system. And so she was getting sicker. And the family had tried what they could. So they sent for Indian doctors from all around the area to come, from other villages. And they came and they did their work upon her, trying to help her get better. But she actually got worse. She couldn't get out of bed now. She had a great fever. She was coughing. She had trouble breathing. And so the people said, it looks like this poor young woman is going to die. She's going to die. Oh, it's so terrible. And the father did not want to hear these words. He loved his daughter so much. So that night, before he went to sleep, what do you think he did? He prayed to the spirits. He prayed to the ancestors for some kind of remedy, some kind of cure for his daughter, some help for her. And guess what happened? While he was asleep, he had a dream. And in the dream, a voice came to him. And the voice said, I'm going to teach you a song. And you must remember this song, because when you wake up in the morning, I want you to leave your village, go up to the mountains. As you go up into the mountains, sing this song. Sing it until you know it's time to stop singing, then look down, your medicine will be there. And so the man woke up. He was so excited. The dream told him of a possible cure for his daughter. So he remembered the song, began to sing it. He went up into the mountains singing this song. He went higher and higher into the mountains singing that song. And when it was time, he knew to stop singing, he did. And he looked down, and there was a bush with blue berries all around it. And he knew this berries must be the medicine. He picked the berries and brought them home. His daughter was so sick she couldn't eat the berries. So he squeezed them and got juice and gave her juice to drink. And she felt better that first day. The next day he mashed the berries so she might not have to chew it. And he fed her that mashed berry, and she was able to eat it, get it down. And she held it there and she got better. The next day she was able to sit up and eat the berries herself. And the people were amazed. They said, wait a minute, how did she come back from, she was at the edge of death. She was going to leave us, but now she's back. She's well again. She's getting better every day. How did this happen? And the man explained how the the berry had given her the medicine she needed. And the dream told him how to find that berry. And the people said, no, that can't be it. It must be more than that. Well, he had another dream. And the dream told him, this is the huckleberry that you were eating. The huckleberry, the juice of the huckleberry is the blood of the earth. It is the most powerful medicine there is. It is the most pure, powerful medicine because the medicine comes from the earth itself. Huckleberry is a powerful medicine. And then the bush that grows, the branches, the stems, they are the veins of the earth. They are the things that bring the blood of the earth to the surface so we might have that medicine. And so the man was able to save his daughter because the huckleberry spoke to him and provided his medicine. And that is all, the coming of huckleberry. And so our people say that the huckleberry is not just a wonderful food, it's also a powerful medicine. And we need that medicine. And so we have many stories about how people go out looking for huckleberries because someone is sick. So it's a medicine to us. It's a wonderful food to eat. I love to eat it, but it's also a medicine. So many of the old people say our food is our medicine. The plant food we eat is our medicine. And our medicine is our food. So again, they have a complex view of the world that's very simple. It's complex, but it's simple. Our food is our medicine. So I've shared a couple stories with you that come from here. But as Fern mentioned earlier, she's from another place. But whenever she travels, because she's a storyteller, she carries those stories in her heart. So wherever she goes, those stories are with her. And we should all understand that when she tells a story, she's giving us a gift from her people and from the earth they live upon. So I want to turn it over to Fern now and have her share a story or two, but have to come from her people about plants.
Thank you. Hello again. I'm going to follow up with a cedar story, a Dakota cedar story. First, you bear with me as I play a few notes on this cedar flute, okay? I am really just learning, and I've been slacking lately too. Excuse me. As I said, I'm just learning. I'm going to tell you the story of how the cedar flute came to the Dakota people. Learning to play this flute and listening to lots of music is how I have been staying sane during this time. So cedar, which we call Hanteshadan, red cedar, is also very important to Dakota people. Cedar is one of our 3 sacred herbs. It's associated with eagles, with the sky, with the powers that dwell up high, with Ska, the sky god. And so cedar is also the tree that the Wahpeton, the thunder beings or thunderbirds, live in. So it has a lot of sacred connotations, just as it does here. And it's a central plant in our medicine stories and in ceremony. So this story is a story from long ago, from a time that was a little bit like right now. It was a time of hardship and famine. People were struggling in this time because they did not have enough to eat, and it was a hard winter. Well, there was a young man in a Dakota village who wished to relieve the hunger pains of his people. Now, this young man was not gifted as a hunter. He did not have, as we say, the elk medicine. The elk, who's wise and swift, is associated with good luck in romance for men. And men who have elk medicine are good hunters of women and deer. But this man did not have elk medicine. He was just a regular old guy. He did have a good bow and arrow and a good head on his shoulders, and he was kind, and he wanted to help. But like I said, he wasn't a great hunter. He had no reputation as a hunter. And so this young man decided to go one morning, to leave the village and go hunting, even though the other hunting parties had had no luck. He decided he would leave on his own and go. And so this young man set out. He set out with a bag of wasna at his waist, which is dried choke cherries mixed with buffalo fat and dried buffalo meat, and it's like trail mix. And so this young man, not too far outside his village, he came across elk tracks in the snow, and he got really excited. Elk tracks hadn't been seen in some time. And so he followed these tracks through the snow all day long, his excitement growing. He kept thinking he was getting closer to that elk, and then it would seem to get further away. He never quite caught sight of it. And then he was so intent on following those tracks that he realized all of a sudden, it's getting dark. And these are the woods now, where the prairie meets the woods. The elk had gone into the woods. Well, this young man knew that he could not track this elk in the woods in the dark, and that it was too late to make it back to his own camp. He would have to sleep right there. Well, this didn't scare him. He had a warm buffalo robe and everything he needed to be comfortable for the night. He was lucky and found a cool, clear stream that was not frozen over. And it was actually right under a cedar tree. And it was nice and dry and cozy. And so right there, he built a fire and he ate his dinner and had water. And he was feeling pretty good. He was very tired after this long day of tracking this elk. And so he started to fall asleep. But as he fell asleep, he heard a sound. He heard a sound. He couldn't quite describe it. What is that sound? He didn't know what it was. It was a little bit scary and spooky. It made him pull his robe more closely around him. But it was also beautiful and sad. And he wanted to hear more of it. Well, this young man was so tired, he fell asleep. He fell asleep listening to that strange sound. And in his dream, the woodpecker, the Huanuka, the red-headed woodpecker, appeared singing that song to him, that strange, sad song, and said, "Young man, follow me and I will teach you." The young man woke up. He woke up and he heard that sound. He heard that sound. he heard that sound. And then, just then, he heard, and he looked up, and overhead on the branch of the cedar tree was the woodpecker, the Wahnuka, the red-headed woodpecker. He was beating on that branch with his bill like it was a little drum. And the young man remembered his dream. And when that woodpecker flew away to another cedar tree a little ways away, the young man followed him. And it was easy to follow him because that woodpecker had his red feathers on top. And so that bird went from tree to tree until it landed in a cedar tree. And there, as the young man approached him, he heard that sound again. And he realized that that woodpecker, the Wahnuka, had hollowed out this cedar branch, this dead branch, with his bill. And that the wind was coming through and making this beautiful music. Oh, he was so impressed. "Koda, my friend," he said, "please let me have this branch. You can make another. I promise you, I will honor you by sharing the story of this gift." And so he took that cedar branch and he took it back to his village. Now, he didn't have any meat. He never did find those elk tracks again. But in his lodge, he was excited once he got home because he was going to show his people this beautiful sound. But once he was in his lodge and he tried to make that music again with this dead branch, he couldn't. He waved it around. He tried to put his hands in different places in the holes. But he realized nothing he did was working, and he didn't know how to play this instrument like the wind had. And so this young man went to a hill nearby and he prayed. He cried for a vision. He cried for a vision of the knowledge that he would need to learn to play this flute. And he fasted and prayed for 4 days. And on the 4th night, a vision came to him. As he slept, the Wahnuka, the red-headed woodpecker, reappeared, and this time he transformed into a man wearing a red feather headdress. And he said, "Watch me and learn. I will only show you once." And so this woodpecker man showed this young man exactly what kind of dead branch on the cedar to take, where exactly to drill the holes, how deeply the interior of this flute should be drilled out, how the mouthpiece should be shaped, why it was important to shape the mouthpiece like the neck of a bird, and why, before you could play this instrument, you must smudge it with some cedar, yes, and you must put some red on it. You must put some red on it, washasha, the sacred red color, to recognize and honor the gift of Wahnuka, the woodpecker. Well, this young man woke from his vision and he followed all the instructions carefully. And when he returned this time to his village, he walked into the village playing this instrument. He played it better than I'm going to play it now. The people were amazed to hear this sound. They wanted to hear more and learn how to play it. And before you know it, the flute was a very popular instrument in Dakota society. However, it has restrictions. So traditionally, only love songs were played on flutes. And the playing of flutes was pretty much restricted to courtship and ceremony. In fact, older, respectable people, it was considered scandalous if someone should sing a song about you on the flute. So just like certain people want to go to their graves now without getting a newspaper headline, back in the day, Dakota people were like, you could be buried with respect if no flute songs had been written about you. But this young man, as I said, he was no great hunter, and he really didn't get any better at hunting. But that hard time did pass, and the people were fed by this music in that hard time. And the young women loved his songs, and he was very popular with his flute. And before long, he was very happily married to a woman who loved him, and he was very happy with her, and they had a family. And so that is the story of the flute and how it came to the Dakota people. And it is a gift of the cedar tree. And so now I'm going to tell you another plant story, but this, let me put this down one second. This plant story is from a little closer to here, but not from right here. As Roger said, we carry our own stories with us, and then we're often honored and privileged to encounter stories in other communities that we are allowed to share. And this is one such story. It is actually, well, I'll talk about it after. This is a story from the Plateau region. It is about the Chemist Bulb, which is a staple food here, but also is absolutely more prevalent on the other side of the mountains because it's drier and there's more of the kind of prairie that it likes. It reminds me a lot of the tushpina, the starchy bulb that is a staple of the Dakota diet on the prairie. And the plant culture is so similar. So, a long time ago, in yet another hard time. Oh yes, we tell stories about hard times. Well, this hard time was a hard time on the Plateau region when the people were hungry. It was a hard time with much famine, much illness. People did not have enough of what they needed. Well, there was a grandmother living in a village. And in this village, she lived with her 2 grandchildren. She was now taking care of them because their parents were no longer alive. These 2 grandchildren were hungry. Like all the children in the village, they were hungry. And even though they were very brave, she could hear them crying at night from hunger. And it tortured her. I can't even imagine. This grandmother, she left her lodge and walked up to a hill nearby because she could not bear the sound of her grandchildren crying from hunger. And so on this hill, she cried for help. She cried with grief. She cried, and as she cried, her tears wet the ground underneath her, and she sank into that wet ground. She sank and she sank until she sank under the ground and she was completely covered. Well, when she did not return home that evening, her children, her grandchildren went looking for her. Grandmother, where are you? She was always there for them, but now she was gone. They went up to that hill. They went up to that hill where she went to go pray, where they knew she went. There was no sight of her, but the young girl said, I can feel our grandmother's spirit right here in the ground. And she sat down and she put her hands on that ground and she started digging. She took out her digging stick and she started digging. I don't know what the Nez Perce or other plateau names for a digging stick is, but the Dakota word for a digging stick is your ibopta, which I love that word. This girl and this boy started digging with their digging sticks and they found these bulbs. These bulbs, their grandmother had become chemists. She had become chemist and they dug these bulbs out and there was a lot of it. And so the grandmother became food for her grandchildren and for the people, and the people were fed. And since this time, the people tell this story of how the grandmother gave herself to the people as food. And this story is told as part of harvests and feasts. And that is the story of Grandmother Camus. And now I believe Roger's coming back. We have a lot of stories about Tishbina, and not that they're exactly the same, but the stories are speaking in a dream language that varies from place to place. So they're very specific to specific places. But they are also, it's a universal dream language. It's like Roger's stories and my stories, these Dakota stories, they're speaking the same kind of language.
That's right. It's something that you learn as you become and do more and more storytelling. So we always encourage everyone, learn your stories from your ancestors and tell them. Learn one from one of your ancestors. You might not be able to find the ancestor, but maybe the people you come from. Find one of their old stories. When I teach classes on storytelling, my students are finding a story from their ancestors. I say to the European American students, I say, if your story has kings and queens in it, you haven't gone back far enough. So find those old stories and learn one, just one, and tell that one story. And I can't guarantee anything what's going to happen, but something will change, something will happen, because you're carrying now the voice of your ancestors, which is a powerful place to be. You now have meaning in the world, and they have meaning. So I love that story. The grandmother became the food the people needed. I'm going to share, Fern shared a cedar story. I'm going to share a cedar story from here, okay? I'll share a story from here. Let's see, make sure, we got plenty of time, all right. This story, as many I learned from a teacher, his name is Johnny Moses, and there's some people who call storytellers, and then you have people called story keepers. They're the ones who know all the stories, and you go to them and they'll share a story with you to help you as you create the stories that you want to tell, to weave a basket of stories. You might need one, and he'll be able to help you do that. And so this is a story I've heard him tell many times, and I want to share it with you. So again, in the language here, this is from right around here. Different tribes tell the story in different ways, in languages. So, Il Ture Tuhak, a long time ago. That's Lishutsa, the language of the people here. My language, Kwithhikiat. Kwithhikiat is what our people say on the other side of the water. But Il Ture Tuhak, way out in the woods, was this big, old grandma cedar tree. Grandma cedar tree, living in the forest, was very, very big and very, very old. She was the biggest and oldest of all the cedar trees. Well, one day, a little tree began to grow next to her. Growing right next to her was this little tree. And it was her grandson. Her grandson's going right next to her. And oh, she was so happy. She wept tears of joy. She was so happy. And that little tree was growing right next to his grandmother. Well, that little tree was growing and growing and growing. And one winter day, a terrible storm came in, thunder and lightning and pouring rain and howling wind, and the trees were all rocking in the wind. The wind was so powerful, it was pushing them around, and that little tree was so small. He could not fight the wind. He could not fight against the wind. And the wind was blowing so hard, he was bending and bending and bending in the wind. And if the wind kept blowing this hard, he would break and he would be gone. So Grandma Cedar Tree saw her son fighting the wind, and she put her branches between him and made a wall, protecting wall, to protect him from the hard wind. Well, he grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And one summer day, oh, the sun was so hot. Everyone felt like they were cooking in this hot sun. It was so terrible. The sun was so hot. And this little tree was so small, he could not fight the heat. In fact, the heat was hurting him. It felt like he was on fire, like he was burning. And Grandma Cedar Tree saw her grandson suffering in the sun. So she put her hands over him, her branches over him, and made shade to protect him from the hot sun. Well, he grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, deer love to eat the green parts of little growing plants and trees. And the little trees are growing green parts every day. So one night the deer were coming towards that little tree. They were going to nibble and eat the green parts. And if they ate too much, they might hurt him. Grandma Cedar Tree saw the deer coming towards her grandson, and she waved her branches and chased the deer away. Well, he grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, he was the only little tree around this part of the forest. All the other trees were so much bigger and older than him, and sometimes they wouldn't even notice him or hear him talking. They were so big and he was so little. And sometimes he wished he had a friend he could talk with and play with, but he was the only little tree around here. And sometimes he felt sad, he felt lonely. And Grandma could feel that he was sad and lonely. She could feel his heart. So she used her power and called the birds to him. And the birds flew to him. They landed in his branches. They flew around him. They sang to him. They talked with him. And he didn't feel alone. Well, he grew bigger and 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 bigger. And now he was bigger than his grandma. He was the biggest tree in the forest now, even bigger than his grandma. Well, another winter day came with a big storm. Lightning, thunder, pouring rain, howling wind, all the trees rocking in the wind. And Grandma was so old now, she could not fight against the wind anymore. She couldn't stand up to the wind. And she was bending and bending and bending in the wind. And if the wind kept blowing this hard, Grandma would break and she would be gone. And he saw his grandmother fighting the wind. So do you know what he did? He put his branches between his grandmother and the hard wind. He protected her from the hard wind. Well, another summer day came and the sun was so hot. Everyone felt like they were cooking in the sun. It was so hot. Everyone was miserable. And Grandma, she was so old now, she could not take the heat of the sun. It was so hot. It felt like she was on fire, like she was burning. And her grandson saw this. And he took his branches and he put them over his grandmother and made shade to protect her from the hot sun. Well, even old trees like Grandma, they still grow green parts. And one night the deer were coming towards Grandma. They were going to nibble and eat those green parts and they might hurt her. But she couldn't do anything. She could not even lift up her arms anymore to stop them. Nothing she could do to stop them. Her grandson saw the deer coming towards his grandmother, and he waved his branches, and he chased the deer away. Well, even Grandma was lonely because now all of her old friends and relatives, they had died and they were gone. They had gone and they left her behind, and she felt so sad and lonely. She missed her friends and relatives so much who had left and gone on. They were gone now, and her heart was so sad. And her grandson could feel in his heart his grandmother's sadness. So do you know what he did? He used his power and he called the birds to her. And the birds flew to her. They sang to her. They talked with her. And she didn't feel so alone. Grandma said, "Grandson, I am very old now. I'm very old. Just let me go now. Don't worry about me. Don't think about me. Take care of yourself. Don't worry about me anymore, grandson. Just let me go. And he said, Grandma, when I was little and the wind was blowing so hard to break me, Grandma, you protected me from the hard wind. Grandma, when I was little and the sun was so hot, I felt like I was on fire. Grandma, you made shade for me, protected me from the heat. Grandma, when I was little and the deer were coming to eat me, Grandma, you chased the deer away. Grandma, when I was little and I was sad and lonely, you called the birds to me so I wouldn't be alone. Grandma, you did all these things for me when I was little. But now that I am big, I will do these things for you. And that is all, the story called Grandma's Cedar Tree. And so again, children, even little children, can explain what they feel in this story. They feel love, they feel connection, they feel all kinds of good feelings. They just say that story just makes us feel good. And hopefully it made you feel good as well, the connection between grandparents and grandchildren. At one point, one thing that I noticed in our old stories, you hear grandma, grandpa, grandma, grandpa, grandma, grandpa, grandchild, granddaughter, grandson, because grandparents were taking care of their grandchildren. Not out of economic necessity or anything like that we see today, but because of, that's just how it's supposed to be. The grandparents take care of the grandchildren. The parents go out and do the work to maintain the home, the fishing, the hunting, the planting, the gathering. And so the grandparents teach the grandchildren. And then another cycle. And then the children become parents, and their parents become the grandparents, and the grandparents take care of. So that cycle that was human has been, it seems like it's been taken away from us, where the grandparents don't have that responsibility. The parents are supposed to do all of that work. And as a grandfather now and a parent, I prefer the grandfather role. I love my children, but my grandchildren are very different, very special. We talk in a different way than I talk with my children. Maybe because I've just learned as I've gotten older, a better way to talk with people about things. So again, the story reminds me of how it used to be, but it also reminds me, because I ask children, how does the story make you feel? Storytelling, people ask me the question, is that story real? Do you really believe that story? Do those things really happen? Well, because Fern mentioned earlier, they speak like dreams, then I believe them. My ancestors told these stories. I have no reason not to believe these stories because they believe these stories in their heart. They came from dreams, they came from experience, they came from the earth itself. And so the stories we tell come from the earth itself. So the plants that grow out of the earth, they have much to teach us because they are grounded in the earth. Things come through them to get to the surface where we live, and we can learn from those plants. So there's one plant I wanted to share with you, a plant story. Won't take long, it's a short story. Again, Johnny Moses taught me this story. He is also related to my tribe, the Clallum people from the Jamestown tribe. And so he tells this story. A long time ago in Quith Ki He Yat, a long time ago in my language, the first death that came to people was a baby. A baby died. That was the first death that came to our people. And the parents were heartbroken. As you can imagine, they were heartbroken. They were so sad, their tears were falling. And they were so sad because this little baby died. And they came with the protocol that we should put this little baby in a basket and put the basket up in a tree to return it to the plants that gave us life. We will return this little baby to that plant, to the plants. And so we're going to put it up in the cedar tree. So the parents had climbed up the tree with ropes. They were pulling up that basket with their little baby in it. And they were crying and they were crying and crying, and their tears were falling to the ground. And as their tears fell to the ground, they finally completed their work. And they came down the tree, and growing where the tree, where their tears had come to the ground, there was a plant that was growing. A plant was growing. And so in a dream that night, the plant that was growing spoke to the parents and said, I am Devil's Club. I am the Devil's Club. I am a plant that has grown for a reason. I want you to take my bark and to make it into a tea. And I want you to drink that tea. And that tea will help you because your spirits are so broken now, so sad. Your spirits have left you, God, under the ground. I will help your spirits come from under the ground and return to you. So drink that tea. And so the parents listened to the dream, they drank the tea. They drank that tea from the Devil's Club. And even though they were still brokenhearted because of the loss of their child, they felt a little better, that life can go on. They had still meaning in life, but they still were so sad, but they would keep drinking this tea until finally they were able to find the peace to live with the knowledge of the child was waiting for them in another world. So that's the Devil's Club story, a very powerful, ancient, old plant, a very powerful medicine plant for our people. And so I was shown, but years and years ago, a design. I want to close this part of our presentation with kind of showing you some stuff here. This is a design that is a basket design. And it is the Devil's Club design. And I want you to look at it very carefully. I'll just let you look at it. This is a devil. Why is it Devil's Club design? Well, the art of our people here is about the black shapes, because we're literate. We look at the black shapes first. That's what we're looking at. And we don't notice anything else. But I want you to look between this line and this broken line here, and look at that white shape between them. Can you see in that white shape, there are two arms that are spread out, and a head. So there's two arms and a head right here. And the line here is the ground. So this piece of art is showing a person, a spirit coming out of the ground. That is a Devil's Club, a spirit that comes out of the ground. So this design to me is very powerful. It shows just the philosophical background behind our stories, philosophical backgrounds that lead to our artwork, philosophical look at life itself. And as I said, as I began this presentation, the plants are our greatest teachers. I have much, much to learn about that, but we still have plants here that are speaking to us, reaching out to us, and they have so much to teach us. And again, when I walk with Fern through any little forested area, any park, whatever, we don't go 5 feet. She doesn't say, stop, look at this plant right here. This is this plant and this is what it does. This is comfrey and you can use it for plant medicine for wounds that stop the bleeding, and or this is for this or this is for that. So again, we all probably know someone like that. Well, maybe not the native side of this, but people that know about the plants. And so as I continue my journey of trying to learn the old ways of my ancestors, including their art and their stories and my language as much as I can, I recognize I have much to learn. But that's actually a very good thing, that you know you have much to learn and you're willing to reach out and listen to other people. So as we Native people try to share our culture and our knowledge of this environment through the plants and the animals and ourselves, we hope this other culture that's come here is willing to listen and ask the questions and say, maybe you who've lived here 40,000 years, maybe you can teach us something about this environment. And so again, we're happy to share these stories, and I'll let Fern add some other things too. We get philosophical now.
These stories really do invite us to reflect on bigger questions. Roger talking about cedar trees and other plant relatives as our teachers makes me think that about how the cedars, those conifers, predate the dinosaurs. Cedars were around before the dinosaurs, and they're still around now. They are one of the most ancient living species on the planet and has so much to teach us. So yes, thanks for allowing us to share these stories.
Yeah, we, I don't know, we wanted to, and someone's putting up their hands. Thank you so much for doing that. I'll teach you what this, I was taught this means, and other people might have other meanings. I don't know if Edie might have a teaching on this, or anyone, other Native people from this area, but I was taught this has symbolic meaning. This called, a gesture is called putting up your hands to people, all right? You put your hands up to people to show respect and honor to them. So it means hello, it means goodbye, it means you're welcome, it means thank you, it means all these good things. I was taught that this gesture, because you lift up your hands, you're lifting people up. You're praising them. You're telling them how good they are, how important they are. You're lifting people up. You lift me up. You lift me up. You lift up my heart. You make me happy. That's one symbolic meaning, very powerful. But I was also taught, going back to our plant teachers, that if you look at the cedar tree, look at the top branches. Any cedar tree, little, adult, elder cedar tree, they have their top branches like this. And our people say, look at the cedar tree. It's giving thanks. Every day the cedar tree gives thanks. In the morning, when it wakes, in the evening, when it goes to sleep, it's giving thanks. We must be like that. We must give thanks. We must give thanks, because we live in a paradise, a place of abundance. We have the cedar tree, gives us our houses, our food, our clothing, our canoes, our boxes, our baskets, our ropes, our nets. Ask for nothing in return. Just gives and gives and gives everything you need to live in the world. You have the salmon coming up the river by the millions at one time, giving us food that we might live, giving us themselves so we can have food so we can live. And the salmon ask for nothing in return either. And so we look at these plants around us, these animals around us, these beings around us, and we notice they're giving themselves without asking for nothing in return, anything in return. And our people say, we must live that life. We must share and give to other people without asking anything in return. So I look at the kindness and love and philosophy and respect of my ancestors, and I hear Fern talking the same language of her ancestors, these strong, powerful, knowledgeable, kind, loving people, that I have so much to learn from them. And one of my paths to learn from them is through our stories, because they would tell these stories that reminded us of our common humanity. Okay, I'm going to say some more. We get this, we talk like this a lot. So I enjoy that. It lifts my spirit to talk this way.
I love these stories too, because they are placing us back into our original relationships with our plant and animal relatives. We're not the center of this. We have a Dakota philosophy, which you may have heard of, called Mitakuye Oyasin. We are all related. Well, out here, folks have the exact same saying, but it's expressed as, the earth does not belong to us, we belong to the earth. So that same idea that we're all connected, that our place in the web of life as humans is no greater or less than anyone else's. And so I think this is a core Indigenous value. I know it's almost cliche that Indians care about the environment, but in fact, listening to the stories of our Mother Earth. So I was taught that these stories actually don't come from people. They come from the land. They come from Mother Earth. And it's the people who listen and share the stories as teachings from the land.
So again, our hands are up to all of you for joining us today, allowing us to share these stories with you. We want to encourage you to go reach back, find your ancestors' stories. They're there somewhere. One of the few powerful gifts I recognize in this high technology, if you Google Hungarian folktales, a bunch of stuff's going to show up. Find one of those stories if you have a Hungarian relatives and learn it so you don't need to read it. You can just tell it from your heart, and then it will come from a different part of who you are. It comes from the same place the dreams come from. Hopefully you noticed in several of the stories, they had a dream and the plant spoke to them. So again, that's a means of communication that the story is reminding us of. So go back, find your relatives, your ancestors' stories, learn one, tell one. That would be doing a blessing to them because they're waiting for you to do this, and share it with other people so we might learn from the wisdom of your ancestors. So again, thank you to the City of Shoreline for making this event happen. And thank you to the plant people that guided us to learn these stories, and we can share some things that they've taught our ancestors. So this is just an all around good thing. We're happy to do this, very happy to do this. And we hope we might see you again sometime and share more.
Thank you so much to Roger and Fern, and thank you, Edie. Edie, did you want to say any last comments? This has been really wonderful. There's lots of appreciation in the chat. I'll let Edie have the last word. And
well, it's so significant that the city is celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day with the use of plants and stories from Roger and Fern about plants, exhibited at Krukenberg Gardens. And because the first people here, the Indigenous people, the Duwamish, used this land to gather and harvest, and they would go from shore to shore, from Lake Washington to Puget Sound, and they'd also collect, they do controlled burning in order to grow more plants, and they would grow kinnick down near Puget Sound, which is why we named the park down there Caillou Ach. And they had many plants through this area that they would then take to their longhouses and survive on. It was so significant to have Shoreline's celebration with the plant stories that you shared today, Roger and Fern. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for having us. We hope to do it again. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
In our language, hoi means goodbye. So hoi, thank you.
Wait, thank you, everyone.
Put our lip out and go toksha.
Different ways.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful Saturday.
Yes, and Monday
Stay
is
safe.
Indigenous Day here in the Seattle area. So there's a lot of events happening online. Check it out, Indigenous Day happenings, many other speakers. So again, there's a lot you can do. Keep going. Thank you.
Good weekend to check out the Cedar too.
Yes. All right.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye, bye, Suni.
Bye. Thank you, Edie.
You're welcome. Stay in touch.